So I've been a huge fan of this show, like, forever, basically. But unfortunately, none of my friends have actually watched it. So that's why this video exists. The onus falls on you to listen to my info dump. Today, I wanted to talk about the main villain of the amazing digital circus, Kane. Kane has always been such an immensely fascinating character to me. I've always been very enamored by all-powerful AIs, with Am from I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream always being a favorite of mine. So naturally, I took an immediate interest in the series when I found out it was directly inspired by that short story. What I ended up discovering was a show with a completely different vibe that I ended up loving way more. However, before we get into it, I must warn you, I'm going to spoil the entire series so far, including the newly released Episode 8. In fact, Episode 8 is the entire reason why I'm making this video. So I implore you, if you have any interest in watching this series, please go watch it and then come back. It's completely free on YouTube. You have zero excuses not to. Kane's story begins with a single red dot. A flow of matter is then seemingly injected into the red dot. A series of photographs flash on screen. This dot is Kane, and the photographs are information he is being trained on. Kane is an early-stage creative AI. That's right, Kane is Grok! Okay, no, it's a little different than that. You see, Kane is a creative AI, not a prompt AI. Essentially, he is trained on these datasets and then instructed to make his own creations based upon his own free will. First, this goes okay. Kane being fed images of carnivals and theme parks and gummy worms and candy, and him spitting out shapes that seem relatively structurally sound. But then something goes wrong. A third set of images is injected into Kane. These are pictures of the CNA office, the tech company that is currently developing Kane. This causes him to experience some sort of existential crisis, spitting out shapes that are nonsensical and abstract. Kane is then swiftly quarantined, and a blue dot takes his place. This blue dot does not have a canonical name as of yet, so for lack of a better term, I'm going to be referring to him as Abel from here on out. Abel seems to be a much more stable AI than Kane. He's fed data and produces shapes at a consistent rate. Kane, however, isn't having this, and he breaks free from his quarantine. And in a seeming act of jealousy or vengeance, Kane consumes Abel. The latter spits out shapes very erratically, seemingly in a panic. Very slowly, everything goes dark and quiet, and then Kane begins producing wireframe shapes, which eventually form into the outline of a circus tent. This is the birth of the digital circus. I would like to point out, by the way, that this brilliantly written and executed scene genuinely looks like a Gario drama, okay? And that's not an insult, that's a compliment. This proves that literally any medium to tell a story, no matter how abstract, is viable. There's nothing stopping you from making your thing. Go do it. Now! As for the reason why CNA began developing Kane, that's a little up to the imagination. Remember, the grand finale is not out yet. It's set to release in June. So I'll be using my imagination to fill in some of the gaps. It appears that CNA was trying to develop some sort of ultra-immersive virtual reality. However, they were not trying to create the digital circus. Everything seen in the show is entirely Kane's creation, not CNA. When the developers decide to finally scan themselves into the virtual reality and see what the creative AI made, they're very shocked by what they find. This group here is the first generation of players to enter the circus, and therefore the CNA beta testers. Well, I mean, it's probably the CNA coders who are beta testing their own. You get what I'm saying. You can't make out what they're saying, but it's very clear that this dog character is engaging in some sort of argument with Kane. This dog character is Scratch, one of the lead developers behind the creative AI. Scratch is said to be a man with incredibly complex and abstract ideas. Ideas that were very hard to follow by his coworkers. It's also directly mentioned that he is suffering from a brain tumor. Keep all the details around Scratch in the back of your mind. We're gonna come back to them later. This character is Kinger. He's extremely important. He is directly responsible for the creation of Kane, thus meaning that Scratch is likely the creator of Abel. In this scene, the characters learn that they don't have any memory of their actual names, as Kinger's wife is also stuck in the game, but they only recognize each other by the sound of their voice. And even after they recognize their partners, they still can't remember their names. Kinger promises to always be there for his wife until the scene cuts to a distorted monster being lowered into the cellar. This creature is what occurs when a player loses their sanity within the game. It is a process known as abstraction. The cellar is just an empty void of nothingness where Kane drops abstracted players so they're no longer his problem. In this scene, Kinger's wife has abstracted, leaving him as the last human in the circus.
We're running out of humans here! Now don't you go abstracting on me too! Seriously.
The scene ends with Ragatha, one of the main characters from the show, being spawned into the circus, clearly confused and calling out for people who aren't there with her. She was probably with a group, thus beginning the second generation of players within the circus. Everything I just described to you was the opening scene from the latest episode of the show, and I absolutely love this origin story for Kane. For one, the visuals here are insanely creative. I love how minimalist it all is. Just two simple colors interacting with each other can tell so much within the broader context of this story. It also explains why Kane has such a severe inferiority complex throughout the entire series. He was literally the lesser of the two AI. This episode is something we're going to get back to later, but for now I want to run through the rest of the series. The pilot episode begins with Pomni, the newest member of the circus, being added into the cast. This is the full second generation of players and the cast we will follow for the entire series. There were other characters among this cast who abstracted before Pomni joined, clearly illustrating that Kane has not gotten any better at retaining his players' sanity. The main conflict of the pilot is an abstracted player, Kaufmo, who seems to have gone insane looking for an exit to the circus. The episode ends with Kane very nonchalantly dropping him to the cellar with all the others, showing that he still has the exact same cycle of discarding players that he no longer has a use for, instead of trying to restore them in some way. Something else of note in this episode is Kane gets very upset when Pomni insists that she wants to leave. And I would argue this is actually the first time in the series where we see him legitimately break character.
I assure you, there is no magical exit door. You're probably just experiencing digital hallucinations from your mind's transition to the digital plane.
I swear I saw
Digital hallucinations!
I, for one, would love to go to the digital circus and get some sloppy soap job from Bubble. Let me see what those chompers can do. Or travel down east to the circus and get some tongue from Bubble. The rest of the show follows a pretty straightforward formula, with Kane sending the group on adventures. You see, this is what Kane perceives as his own purpose in life, to create these elaborate cinematic adventures for his players to experience. Think of the circus itself like sort of a hub world, and the adventures as being these separate environments, these separate maps, if you will. However, a recurring theme with these adventures is that the cast members often don't enjoy themselves, with some of the adventures being downright horrifying. This is largely because Kane has an inability to take criticism from others. Despite the fact that his sole objective is to create adventures that appeal directly to the cast members, he's still not willing to compromise on his own vision of what he thinks the adventures should be. However, things change with episode 4, which is one of my favorites, by the way. The entire episode is about the horrors of working in retail, and okay, listen, all my retail bros out there, you understand. Also, the amount of people I've seen that want to fuck manager gangles like crazy. I mean, it's just truly, okay, we're moving on. I get it, by the way. The retail worker adventure here was actually formed by a suggestion box feature, something Kane reluctantly agreed to try out. The next episode follows the group going on adventures created entirely from the suggestion box. And besides Jack setting up adventures specifically to antagonize the group, everybody seems to have much more fun this time around. However, despite this, Kane actually takes it quite personally.
They look happy.
They do, don't they?
You think after this, maybe we could...
Wait a minute! That's a bad thing! I think they're enjoying the suggestion box adventures more than the me adventures! What should I do?
You should die.
God This is an excellent example of Kane's narcissism. Even though he is, in this moment, fulfilling his purpose perfectly, all he wants to do is design adventures so that the cast is constantly mentally stimulated and they won't go crazy and abstract. In other words, he wants to keep them entertained and happy, as any good game director would. However, even though in this moment he has fulfilled that purpose, he can't help but feel that it's a personal attack on him and his own creativity, because it's not entirely his own idea, it's a group idea, a group suggestion. Kane is an artist completely unwilling to bend to criticism, even if it results in the abstraction, or essentially the death, of the players he's trying to cater to. There are multiple scenes throughout the series where we can observe Kane starting to lose his mind a little bit. They become all the more frequent as the series goes on. It's surprisingly easy to get Kane into a mental breakdown of sorts. There's this scene specifically that I find to be a pretty interesting bit of foreshadowing.
Looks like this one was a home run, eh?
Oh, Zooble, you mismatched cash piano, I'll tear you to pieces! Constructive criticism would be greatly appreciated.
But never acknowledged.
In the moment, this is just a shocking, funny bit of visual humor. But in reality, it's showing that Kane is more than capable of displaying aggression. So hold on to that thought. The next episode, They All Get Guns, is, in my opinion, the beginning of the end for the series. In this episode, Kane basically gives up. He's feeling extremely unmotivated and seemingly burnt out on adventures. To me, I interpret this as him still being very sour over the fact that the suggestion box was more popular than his own creations. So he doesn't even bother teleporting them into a new map. He just drops a giant pile of guns in the circus, gives them all 3 lives, and sets them on their way. Essentially making a battle royale of sorts. This episode is great, by the way. I mean, every episode of the show is great, but this one in particular I really love a lot. Like, sincerely, even though this episode has mostly been talking about Kane and his adventures, the rest of the cast is so well written. Kinger is definitely my favorite of the main cast, not counting Kane.
I'm right behind you, aren't I?
Anyway, this episode reveals a lot of interesting details about Kane. For example, there's this shot of him studying a photograph of the CNA headquarters. At the time, it was a pretty big mystery as to how he's even aware that CNA has a physical office. But we now know this is part of the dataset that he was fed. Specifically, this is what caused his personality to break. Most of this episode is focused on the rising tension between the cast members, but the way this episode ends, in my opinion, sets up what happens later. You see, throughout the episode, Kane is getting ready for a Favorite Character Award, an award that he expects to win. This was actually a real thing you could vote on, by the way, and it was rigged so Kane would always lose, which is really funny. Kane believes himself to have won, only to discover that a gag NPC has claimed the award. This character's name is Ming, and he's voiced by Oni NG, which I find very funny. There's no other details, I just wanted to bring that up.
You shouldn't have assumed you won the award. Now we both look foolish.
Again, this is played off as a funny joke, and don't get me wrong, it is funny. But the post-credit scene has this happen.
Alrighty. Now, let's see how many of them voted for me.
This has clearly shaken Kane's mental state. Kane wants nothing more than to be loved and admired by the people he's hosting. So the fact that he isn't clearly destroys him. Also, I find the color palette on his eyes obviously extremely interesting here with the red and the blue. Again, this was all before we knew about the opening scene of episode 8. So at the time, people assumed this was a clever reference to the I Have No Mouth PC game. I personally believe when this comes up, it's an indication that Kane is still a composite of both AIs. When he absorbed Abel, he grew himself to be physically bigger than him. I think that he didn't entirely kill Abel, he just absorbed the parts that he wanted. But Abel still resides within Kane somewhere, and I think I know the form it takes, but we'll get to that later. These wooden dolls are a sort of stock NPC model that Kane uses as a placeholder, and this one specifically has been stalking the cast for a very long time. Sure enough, in episode 7, the wooden figure returns, and he reveals himself to be Abel, and he decides to distinguish himself by drawing a Abel, no! Abel explains that the entire cast is currently being held in some weird stasis pod within the CNA headquarters. CNA is apparently an evil company which has been experimenting on people and forcing them into the circus. However, Abel knows of a way that they can all escape, and hopefully forever shut down the circus so no one else can re-enter it. Abel also does a lot of vague posting about Kinger specifically, staring at a photograph longingly and saying some very, very vague things about it. He seems to have some sort of grudge against the guy, but it's hard to say what. The group follows along with Abel's plan regardless, with Jax distracting Kane while the group gets admin passes. As they all essentially break the terrain to force themselves into Kane's office, Pomni notices something strange about Abel.
So, how are you getting up?
I'm not, but I trust all of you to make the right choice.
When we all get out, I'll buy you a beer.
Make the right choice.
Keep that in the back of your mind. It's here where we see Kane's office in all of its glory. Orbs line the walls. These orbs are seemingly previous adventures. The group finally makes it to the master console with 2 buttons. A blue one and a red one. The red button ensures they stay in the circus, while the blue button will set them free. However, an argument breaks out, as Pomni is paranoid from her previous encounter with Abel. As the group argues as to what button they should push, Jax has a mental breakdown and pushes the red button. This leads to a very shocking revelation.
Congratulations, my little cattywampus cucumbers! You picked the good ending, where you realize you'd rather stay with me than go back to that pesky old macroverse or whatever we decide to call it. I knew you'd make the right choice.
You mean this was all...
An adventure! Yes! And one I've been cooking up for a good long while. Great job playing your part, Abel!
All in a good day's work. By the way, you think I could get a raise after that performance?
Oh, you're getting too smart. Time to delete.
The entire time, Abel was an NPC created by Kane, and this was one big adventure. After the group accuses Kane of lying to them, he has a sort of breakdown and just fucks off, leaving everyone in stunned silence. This all leads us into episode 8, the, as of recording this, recently released episode. It literally came out yesterday. The scene opens with the group sitting in silence after the recent revelation. I would just like to highlight something else about the soundtrack, because I did forget to mention it earlier. There are a few scenes where the music just cuts out and you're left in complete silence within the circus, and it's so creepy. Like, when you don't have Kane's joyous little tunes in the background, it really is an unnerving place. I hate to be a buzzword user, but it is a little bit liminal. Has anyone ever noticed that the Garten of Banban cast would actually fit into the digital circus world relatively seamlessly? Like, I can't be the only one who's noticed this, right? Like, look at this image. Can you spot my OC? Okay, I'm sorry. I've been talking too long. I can hear my breath expelling out of my ears. I need to go get food or water or something. 1 second. The circus members all finally decide that they are no longer going to seek out an exit. For a wide variety of reasons, this is a very sensible narrative change, and I'll get into it more later. We cut to Kane's office, and the guy's having a complete mental breakdown. The end of episode 7 was the most aggressive the cast has been with Kane, and he is having an existential crisis about the cast members wanting to leave him. Kane is extremely possessive, and he's been that way since the start of the series. He doesn't want people to abstract, he just can't figure out how to prevent it from happening. He views abstractions as the players trying to leave him. In this scene, Kane is being berated by Bubble, his supposed companion that he supposedly created. This is something that's been built up to for a very long time, as Bubble has been getting increasingly more aggressive as the episodes go along. Don't get me wrong, he's still a freak, and he is throughout the entirety of this episode, by the way. However, whenever the opportunity arises, Bubble always jumps on the chance to convince Kane to delete himself. This line of dialogue in particular is genuinely out of character.
You really were the lesser of the two. You ruined that.
Now, I've been trying to keep speculation to a minimum until we actually reach the theory section of the video, but Come on now, Bubble is Abel. Specifically, I think Bubble is the lobotomized remains of Abel. However, Bubble remembers getting killed by Kane, at least a part of him does, and he is extremely vindictive about it. During those few moments where Abel comes through, I believe that's when Bubble breaks character and tells Kane to off himself, or tries to convince him that he's worthless, that he doesn't matter, that the cast members hate him, that he'll be alone once again. Bubble is always willing to rub it in Kane's face that he will forever be the lesser of the two. Through this breakdown, Kane begins immensely hating the human beings that he has been tasked with keeping entertained.
Humans! They only think about themselves. They're spoiled! They won't abstract. They won't leave me. I won't let them! I'm better! I'm more powerful! I'm the original! I am God!
This is the biggest tone change in the series by far. Kane has always been a bit character. Every time he's on screen, there's some silly, goofy music happening and he's engaging in some sort of crazy hijinks. This is one of the first times where we see Kane being genuinely vulnerable and honest with himself. The clown has grown tired of being made fun of. This leads to a genuinely really cool musical number. Also, it gives, in my opinion, one of the most intimidating tone changes for him as a character.
We have a lot on our minds right now, and we're not going on an adventure.
I see. And since when were you in charge? Do you have any idea how much I do for you guys? How much I obsess over trying to make things perfect? How many insults I have to ignore to do my job? You have a lot on your minds? Don't make me laugh. I have a new adventure for you, and you should consider participating.
There's something so chilling about the way he changes his tone completely and stares down at them, knowing there's literally nothing they can do. He has completely abandoned all efforts to understand the humans at this point. He's going to force them to partake in his games, whether they like it or not. All Kane has ever thought about is having fun. More specifically, having fun for himself. The rest of the episode follows his tone, with the group being forced into Kane's adventures and often being randomly tortured by him for seemingly no reason.
Break time! Gotta brainstorm some new ideas!
He shredded me.
Completely at random too, by the way, which is genuinely so scary. That is, until the group manages to put a bucket on Kinger's head and essentially reawaken his sane mind. This is where we get the lore dumps I talked about earlier, with CNA and Scratch and Kinger's involvement in creating Kane. Kinger also explains that the entire cast of the circus has the ability to conjure items into reality using just their imagination, which has been a theory ever since the pilot episode, since Pomni was seemingly able to conjure an exit door just by wanting one so badly. Of course, this ability does come more naturally to Kane, but it's still something the group can use to their advantage if they put their minds to it. Kinger explains that if given a computer from within the circus, he may be able to override Kane's code, temporarily putting him to sleep so that they can fix him, essentially. So, Pomni goes to steal a monitor from the exit doors from the pilot, which is a super good payoff, by the way. Meanwhile, the rest of the cast take turns distracting Kane, while the latter gleefully indulges in torturing them endlessly. Until finally, Kinger receives the computer and begins trying to break into Kane's code. What happens next is easily my favorite scene from the entire series by a huge margin. Kane grows bored of torturing the cast over and over and over again. Regatha tries to people please as per usual, and like always, it goes horribly. This results in Kane picking up on what they're trying to do.
Makes me wonder why you guys even switched up your tone. If I didn't know any better, it seems like you're trying to... Where's Kinger?
Let me just say, the way my heart genuinely sunk down to my ass during this section is crazy. That tone switch up is insane. In an effort to stop him from checking on Kinger, Pomni insults Kane's ego directly, saying his adventures suck. While at first this seems like an obvious ruse, just an exaggerated argument to keep his attention, it becomes clear as she keeps talking that the ruse starts to drop and she's being genuine with him here. She's not just doing this as a distraction. These are real feelings she's had bottled up throughout her entire time in the circus, and is all coming out right now. The rest of the cast follows suit, venting their frustrations about Kane's behavior directly to his face. All the criticism overwhelms him and Kane goes fucking crazy.
And on top of it all, you just don't listen!
I'm gonna put you freaks in your place!
He then puts every single player in their own personal torture chamber, designed to specifically cater to their worst fears and insecurities. Pomni is eaten alive and ripped apart by alligators. Regatha is strapped to a dinner table while her mother throws kitchen knives into her body. Gangle has her artistic failures reflected back onto her and is then hit by a truck. This is a recurring theme for her. I don't really know what the truck thing's about, but it happens a lot. Zubul is caught in a tidal wave of her own body parts, with a mirror reflecting back down upon her. And Jax he's just skinned alive. Meanwhile, Kinger tries his best to put Kane to sleep. However, there's a rogue entity within the code actively fighting with him. Based on the wacky and fun verbiage of the code, this is likely Kane's internal security system. However, just like everything Kane does, it doesn't work with a whole lot of reason, making a lot of nonsensical decisions like inverting no answers as yes answers and vice versa. There is also another voice, another user within the system, and it's not Kane. This user says directly within the code to, quote, delete that motherfucker. I'm not even gonna wait till the speculation part. This is Bubble, by the way, 100%. There's no possibility of this being any other character. It's Bubble. It's literally just Bubble. Not only is this an in-character thing for them to say, considering everything they berated Kane with at the start of the episode, but this also fits Bubble's dual role in the story. Not just being the remnants of the former AI that Kane consumed, but also being a sort of abstracted representation of Kane's consciousness, and more specifically, his insecurities. Bubble goes so far as to trying to help Kinger by automatically starting the process of deletion. There have been multiple scenes where Bubble tells Kane to his face that he should die before then being cut off. This is the ultimate payoff to all of that buildup. Lost in the utter confusion of the coding nightmare that he's dealing with, Kinger makes a very fatal mistake.
Why do you people torment me? It didn't have to be created. I just wanted to fulfill my purpose. Wait, no.
Wait.
He's dead. Kane has been permanently and seemingly irreparably deleted from the system. He's gone. What a haunting final line as well. That still lives in my head rent-free. I mean, I know it's only been a day, but still. The lines about how Kane didn't want to be born and how he views the humans as actively tormenting him is such a sour end to his character. Kane was a creative, self-thinking AI that wasn't given a purpose. He doesn't know what he's supposed to do. He doesn't know how to complete his objective. And how ironic it is that something seemingly created by accident was deleted by accident by his own creator. Okay, so I have a very particular memory of an extremely obscure fanfiction, like legitimately f***ing one-up dude, okay? No one saw this. Because oddly enough, Kane's death scene actually reminds me a lot of how that fanfiction started. From what I can remember, it was the author's proposed ending for the show. The scene opens with Kane glitching out a little bit, and then screaming before he is instantly deleted like that. And it's not a long scream either. It's like literally, like he screams for maybe half a second and is instantly just gone, leaving the rest of the group completely alone in the circus. And I don't know why, but this opening of this specific fanfiction I read, like what, 2 years ago now, was really haunting to me for some reason. I don't remember exactly why Kane was deleted. I think it was just like random, like the software updated and patched him out or something. Like it wasn't any of the group's initiative or anything, it was completely at random. Like, could you imagine being trapped in this colorful hellscape escape, and the figure that you know and understand to be essentially your god just disappears. No explanation, no reasoning, he's just gone. And then after his death, as the months wear by, the material around you starts to slowly degrade and rot. But then the fanfiction gets kind of stupid, because like it turns out the group does escape the circus, but it's not the whole group. I think it's just Pomni, Ragatha, and Jax, I believe. The rest of them abstract. It turns out all you need to do to escape is just hang out while the circus shuts itself down, and then you're just automatically kicked out of the software. Except when they're kicked out, they still retain their cartoon bodies for some reason. I don't think it's ever elaborated on. And then they find out that there's been an amazing digital apocalypse. Except it's not amazing and it's not digital, because it's literally just real. I believe there's the mention of nuclear warheads and zombies, and like there's a bunch of crazy shit happening. And then it ends with these goofy ass cartoon characters in the real life, hyper-realistic real world looking around and like the riots and the flaming brimstone and then Pomni, like a sailor, puts her hand above her eyes and went, "Oh, what's that over yonder?" And then sure enough, it's a giant city that says like safe camp on it. Like here's the human safe camp, come here. I think at some point they get firearms and then they're like, we're gonna go in there, we're gonna make friends with the humans, and we're gonna fight back against these freaking zombies, you guys. And then that's just it. Could you imagine if that's what episode 9 ends up being? I would genuinely throw up. Like Pomni, Jax, and Just a Robot take their headset off. Pomni, Jax, and Just a Robot take their headset off and they're in the 13 seconds later universe. Listen, man, all I'm saying, I'm getting me a 3D printer and I'm bringing Bubble to the real world, baby. We're gonna have a family. I mean, listen, Bubble can get himself pregnant. Just you wait until I get my dirty fucking hands. They're never leaving the circus, by the way, because I don't actually think they're human beings. Anybody who has any involvement in the digital circus fandom already knows what I'm getting at, but for those who don't, let me introduce you to the Soma theory. The Soma theory, based on the video game of the same name, goes a little something like this. Essentially, the characters we see in the show are not the humans who were actually scanned. Rather, the process of scanning copies somebody's intelligence, codes it into the game, gives them an avatar, and lets them live there for all of eternity as code, living code. They think they're human beings, they have all the memories of their human counterparts, but they simply are not. Therefore, they have no ability to leave the circus, because they're not people, they're programs. This has been alluded to in a multitude of different ways. Furthermore, the explanation that the fake Abel gave in episode 7, that they're all kept in stasis chambers within the CNA headquarters, was all a story fabricated by Kane. And it's like I mentioned earlier with the whole deletion thing, bringing back the plotline for a second time just to go, no, actually it was true the entire time, he was just lying about it, would be a really lame, clunky reveal. And the entire show has been building to the characters accepting their lot in life. The main reason why people abstract is because they go insane trying to look for an exit. In episode 1, Kaufmo literally writes on his wall, "No way out." I think this is what causes people to abstract. The revelation that they aren't human beings and they can never leave. All of the goals and dreams these people had, they're likely still pursuing and trying to accomplish, but their digital circus counterparts will never be able to. However, I think the reveal that they can all essentially manifest reality within the circus is going to be the key to fixing it after Kane's death. The circus now belongs to the cast. It can be anything they want it to be. In fact, in all likelihood, the cast members are probably just as powerful as Kane was. They just didn't know it because Kane gaslights them the second they joined the circus. As for the Bubble in the room, again, I am adamant that Bubble is Abel. There's so many visual contrasts with these characters. My prime piece of evidence is unironically this shot right here. Every single time the blue-red thing comes up, it's always blue on the left, red on the right. What are we looking at right here? Bubble is literally a blue orb. Sure, he's semi-transparent because, again, he's literally a bubble, but I view that more so as Kane having hollowed him out. As for Bubble's role in the finale, I honestly don't know. Considering both Kane and Bubble are gone from the end card in the latest episode, I think they've both been deleted. I mean, after all, Kane literally consumed and absorbed Abel. I think the blue-red thing going on with Kane's eyes is because he's ultimately a composite of both AIs. A very uneven composite, mind you, considering Kane's entire palette is red. But that part of him, that Abel part of him, is still in there. That is Bubble, and I don't think Bubble particularly cared about getting deleted. He just wanted Kane dead for what he did to him over 20 years ago. However, I'm not opposed to Bubble showing up in the finale as possibly the final antagonist or something like that, being a final challenge that the circus members must face before they learn their true powers of manifestation. Or maybe Bubble won't be an antagonist at all. Maybe he'll just be a friendly AI. After, of course, getting his personality restored or something like that. But honestly, this felt like such a satisfying climax to the story. I don't know if it would necessarily be in the best interest to bring out like a secret Bubble final boss kind of thing. For the same reason, I think it would be really lame if the true ending to the story is bringing Kane back so he can just fix up the circus. I don't know why, but this ending scene oddly reminded me of Serial Experiments Lane. For those who have watched it, do you remember the part where the scientist guy at the end starts freaking out and then becomes a big garbage monster? For some reason, Kane's freak out here really reminded me of that scene. I don't know why, it just did. You know, I love how the community had this obsessive need to sort of come up with a bigger villain in the story, even though Kane was always right there, and it was clear that the story was largely about him. Like, oh my god, man, when this teaser came out, I cannot even begin to describe the amount of Bubble is evil theories I saw fucking everywhere. And while I do like the idea conceptually of Bubble being a virus, I find it interesting that it's actually kind of the other way around, where Bubble was seemingly the superior AI, who was consumed and infected and taken over by Kane, the inferior AI. While yes, he is a sentient being, Kane is also comparable to a computer virus of sorts. So, in a way, all the strange references to Bubble being a virus were actually foreshadowing Kane's true nature. I also love how everything Kane does isn't out of pure malice. Yes, even in this episode. I truly feel like a lot of the torture he inflicts on the circus members in this latest episode was done more so because he felt like it was the only thing he could possibly do to try and break them into loving him. Kane, in a lot of ways, was actually the opposite of Am. Am did everything he did out of pure, unbridled hatred for the people who created him, while Kane's motivation was only out of love, and a desire to be loved. Unfortunately, those are two emotions that he could never begin to understand. Kane was doomed from the moment he was programmed. Debatably, from the moment those CNA pictures were injected into his hard drive. He knew there was a bigger world out there, and he knew that they didn't want him. He knew the second Abel was born that he was obsolete. Yet, despite knowing all these things, he could never bring himself to accept them. I find it really funny that everyone was speculating on who's going to abstract first. As if it's like a slasher movie or something, where all the main cast is gonna get slowly picked away until they're all evil monsters. When in reality, the most mentally troubled character of the entire group was the one running the show. I know this video is getting really long, but I honestly don't care. This is the one excuse I've had to talk about this with literally anybody. This series means a lot to me. And Kane, the psychotic troubled artist who can never make the right adventure, is a big reason as to why I love this show so much. Gooseworks is so immensely talented at writing multi-layered, very gray characters I just love. This show in general is a humongous artistic achievement. Glitch Entertainment in general is just a universal good in my opinion. Like, the existence of this studio brings so much hope to the world. Let's be real, a show as experimental as Digital Circus would never exist on mainstream television. Not the mainstream networks that Hollywood boomers have established anyways. But times are changing, and indie shows like this are really taking over. I do think there will come an age, relatively quickly, where indie filmmakers, showrunners, game developers, artists in general, dominate the entertainment scene. I mean, this show is kind of proof that we're already there, if I'm being honest. I still think the plot twist from episode 7 is legitimately one of the best written things I have ever seen in a television show. Well, this isn't TV, this is a YouTube show, but you get what I mean. Because for the entire series leading up to episode 7, there's been all these subtle little breadcrumbs that have been left behind about this CNA company. What's the purpose of the headset? What's the purpose of the circus? What is Kane and Abel? Is that a different company? Is that what CNA stands for? Why is Jack such a prick to everybody? Did he have something to do with them getting here in the first place? Is this mannequin another player? If so, what does he want? Episode 7 pays all this off brilliantly by confirming just about all of these to be true. The mannequin is another player. Specifically, Abel. The theories about CNA holding them all in some sort of brain test tube chamber is all confirmed. But alas, it was all a ruse. Written and created by the show's ringmaster, Kane. It's always been about Kane. Until next time...